Thank you, Nitya. Okay. Very good afternoon to everyone. I'm Andy and CT over there. And just to say, I love Stella's analogy of a budding plant, you know, and instead of attempting to change the plants, we change the environment. And just to take a shift from edutech to assessment, I think this is, we want to share with you how we have conducted a research on progress monitoring for dyslexic primary school learners in the English exam skills program to determine if the duration or the duration of the intervention affects and impacts students' performance. Okay, so this is an overview of what we'll be covering today. What exactly is the English Exam Skills Program? So I'll be sharing with you a little bit on that before I will go into the research aim, literature review, and methodology. The bulk of CT's presentation, we'll be sharing with you the data collected, data analysis, as well as the discussion. So, the English Exam Skills Program aims to support learners in the mainstream primary school from primary 3 all the way to primary 6 with the ultimate aim of helping them to achieve in the primary school living examination at the end of their primary school. So what exactly is this primary school living examination? Now, it's a national exam that all students in the primary school have to take at the end of primary 6, and the scores will determine which secondary school that they will enter into. So for the English subject in the PSLE, there are 4 papers. You can see that, paper 1, writing, paper 2, language use and comprehension, paper 3, listening comprehension, and paper 4, oral communication. In the English Exam Skills Program, our focus is only on paper 2. But if you look at the components in paper 2, there are a total of 9 components. So while it's nearly impossible to cover all of them, as our lessons are only conducted 1 hour per week, so we have specifically chosen these components to be covered: editing, synthesis and transformation, and comprehension open-ended. So reading comprehension. So these are the 3 components that we are researching on. Later on, we'll present to you the scores. But if you can see comprehension close, it's not included in this research, however, it's part of our newly developed curriculum. So students are grouped according to primary 3 and 4. They will learn foundational skills in grammar, editing, and reading comprehension. Before they move on to P5 and 6, they'll be grouped together, and there's an added emphasis on synthesis and transformation. Okay, so just a bit more about the program. In our intervention program, our class sizes are small, up to a maximum of 5 students. And in every lesson, we make sure that we use a unique approach called the rim air. So what is this rim air? It's where in every lesson, at the start of the lesson, the teacher will first review the concept that has been taught in the previous lesson. And then we'll introduce the concept for the day. We'll model it for the students, we'll apply it together. And at the end of the 1 hour lesson, all students will get to attempt independent practice. So the practice questions at the end of it is crucial because it mirrors the exact questions that they will see in the PSLE English paper. And I think that's important for students to be able to transfer the skills and concepts that they've learned into their school exams. And at the end of it, we will recap what has just been taught for the lesson. So, how did we come to this point where we are, I mean, why do we need to conduct this research? Now in 2015, when, around the time when the program was newly launched, we wanted to be sure that what we are doing does indeed benefit students. So we have conducted a research to determine if the English Exam Skills Program help dyslexic learners. And it does, and so we wonder which aspects of the program helps the students. And so one of the factors we suspected was classroom practices. So we have observed a few of our teachers, recorded videos of them, going through hours of videos, and we have derived good teaching practices that teachers employ in the classroom that benefits students with dyslexia But still we wonder, why do some students improve more than the others? And so we have come to this point where we want to investigate if the duration of intervention for learners with dyslexia impacts their performance and scores, as well as the retention of concepts. So let me share with you some literature that supports our what we are doing. Right, so especially for learners with dyslexia, I think having to take an exam is pretty much a challenge, and these are the 4 factors that we have identified. Number 1, written response. If you remember earlier, I've shown you, we have looked through the scores. I think about 75% of the marks are allocated and based on written responses. And because of that, I think other factors come into play, such as the ability to spell, sentence construction, and text processing. So all this does affect. Exam is timed, so with that comes maybe unnecessary and added pressure. And many times our students have to process and navigate through long sections of text, especially in the paper 2. Let me give you an example. This is, I think, the latest primary school living examination English paper, the reading comprehension text that all students have to navigate through. And no, our students with dyslexia do not get a discount. They still have to read this text. And after reading, they have to attempt 10 open-ended questions that pretty much require long written responses. So it's important to monitor progress, as the data that we collect can be used to help us evaluate the effectiveness of our instruction. And I do think it's crucial to monitor students' performance on a regular and consistent basis. So progress monitoring does help us with that. And it can be pretty much easily implemented with individual students in a classroom setting, or in this research as a whole entire cohort. So for long-term intervention, these 2 factors are important. Firstly, consistency. I think in the English Exam Skills program, our teachers have shared beliefs and values, as well as teaching practices, and it's important to have good and coordinated support system. Take, for example, that all teachers go through the same training, and even up to now, we have a termly in-service training where we share good teaching practices and we support one another through areas of difficulties. Okay, so let's go back to the research. Who are our participants? We have 96 student participants. So at the start of term 1, take in January, week 1, there are 80 students in the English exam skills. So these 80 students, they take an entry test at week 1 of term 1 in January. And then in term 2, around March, 8 new students join in. They take the same entry test. And in term 3, 8 more students enter and they take the same entry test as well. And at the end of term 3, all 96 students take the same exit test. What it means is there are 3 groups of students. The first group would have received 30 weeks of intervention, the second group 20 weeks, and the third group 10 weeks, right? Okay, so who are these students? They are from the primary 5 and 6 level. They are diagnosed with dyslexia, and they concurrently attend our main literacy program. So the main literacy program runs for 2 hours a week, and on top of that, an additional hour, they attend the English exam skills program. So the focus of the main literacy program is to support dyslexic learners in the basic literacy, but for us, we aim on top of that to support them with the exam skills, targeting the 3 components that I've mentioned just now. So this is the timeline of our research. Okay, and it's a longitudinal study, and in the entry and exit test, there are 30 questions, open-ended, so no chance of guessing the answer. And we have allocated 10 questions to each of the components of editing, synthesis and transformation, and reading comprehension. Lessons run for 1 hour a week. We follow the Orton-Gillingham principles, such as the curriculum is structured and cumulative. We use multisensory approaches through having manipulatives and other resources. And we observe the remit approach in every lesson. All teachers are trained and attain a professional certificate, and they must be teaching for a minimum of 2 years. Okay, so I'll pass on the time now to Siti. She'll share with you the results that we have collected and in comparing these 3 components and whether the duration of time and affects students' performance.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Okay, we will now take a look, examine the data and findings for these 3 components. Okay, basically what we've done is the completed test scripts of the entry and exit tests were individually marked and the scores were tabulated. The marks for each of the components that were mentioned just now were allocated according to unique marking rubrics. I will explain to you more later about this. And then we conducted a t-test to compare the scores of the 3 groups, okay, for each of the components. And then, on top of that, we also conducted a 2-way ANOVA to compare the results achieved by the 3 groups of students in terms of their combined scores for all the components. Yeah. Okay, okay, we now come to synthesis and transformation, the results obtained in this section. Okay, just for the benefit of our non-Singaporean guests, the synthesis and transformation section is a section of the paper which consists of 5 questions in which students are required to join 2 sentences together using given connectors or transform sentences. Okay, so the paper looks like this. Yeah. Okay. There are just 2 questions here, 2 out of 5. Okay, so basically, the top row actually is a list of the topics that the students in our program have been taught, and they are actually similar to the topics that are covered in the mainstream schools English exam syllabus. Okay, so under each topic, there are different concepts that are taught. And then these concepts actually form part of the marking rubrics, our unique marking rubrics. And they are actually tested in our entry and exit tests. Okay? Just to give you an example of how we allocate the scores for a certain topic, I'll just give you an example of a question that whereby the student is required to transform a sentence in the direct speech to the indirect speech. Okay, maybe you may want to take a moment to look at this question and see, probably think for yourself, what is required of the student to know and apply when attempting to change or transform this sentence from the direct to indirect speech. Okay, so the answer would probably begin with Julie said. Maybe you just take a moment to think about it. Okay, done? Okay. Okay, so this is the answer. Okay, so when transforming this sentence from the direct to indirect speech, there are 3 changes, okay, that the student has to make. So basically, the student is expected to know these 3 concepts. Okay, so for this section, 3 marks will be allocated for if the student is able to execute all 3 changes correctly. Okay, so our results demonstrated that significant improvement is observed when the p-value is less than 0.05. So it is quite obvious here that students who have received support for up to 30 weeks, okay, achieve the most significant improvement. All right? Okay, for reading comprehension, okay, these are the topics that are taught to the students for the period of time that they undergo the program. And below are the concepts that are taught under each topic. just to give you an example of how we are assessed, how the students are assessed, we give you an example of a sample question which tests on the students' skills in question analysis. Okay, so this is a sample of a question that is given in the entry-exit test. The question goes like this: which word in paragraph 2 shows that Della was very proud of her hair? So basically this question, in this question, the student is required to identify if this question is a right there question or think and search question. Right there question is a question whereby the student is able to make a direct reference in the text and probably lift it off in their attempts to respond to the question. But in a think and search question, the student is required to not just locate sections of text to respond, but they are required to draw their own inferences and possibly phrase their own answers. Okay, so if the student is able to identify this question type, 1 mark is given. Okay, so for this component of the paper, of the test, 2 groups made significant improvements. Basically, students who have been supported for 20 weeks and students who have been supported for 30 weeks. Okay, editing. Okay, what is this editing section all about? It's a section of the paper whereby students are required to correct misspelled words and grammatical errors. Okay? Okay, so the paper typically looks like this. Okay, so if you can see, the misspelled, the errors are, denoted by the underlined and italicized words, and the students are required to fill in the boxes with the correct answers. Okay? But for the purpose of this research, we only considered the correction of the spelling of the words. Okay? So these were the topics, more or less the topics that were covered, that were taught to the students and tested in the entry and exit test. Okay, these are sample questions whereby students are required to apply, okay, the concept of spelling rules, soft G and DGE, okay, in their attempt to correct the spelling of the words. So 1 mark is given for that. Okay, so the results demonstrated that those who have been supported for 30 weeks, again, okay, showed significant improvement. Okay, so we have more or less looked at the scores under each component. So on top of that, we actually combined the scores of all the students in the 3 groups for all the 3 components and did a 2-way ANOVA to actually compare the compare against each other. Okay. So what it demonstrated was that interventions were generally successful for everyone, with improvements noted. Okay, in the results of most students, and the general trend is that the students who have been supported for 30 weeks made the most improvement. Okay, so we have already looked at the data and the findings, okay? So of what use is this to us as educators, right? So the first thing that we should consider is actually it could enhance, okay, our way of teaching, our instructional approach, and use the data to actually look into providing support, additional support, for students who continue to struggle. Just like what Stella has mentioned, you can't change the student, right? So you have to change your approach, all right? So secondly, we have to also look at ways to, as teachers, we have to look at other possible ways to develop tools to measure students' progress, not just depending on exit and entry tests, okay? And the third aspect is that we should also look at skills other than conceptual skills. Okay, a good example is when we were going through correcting the, not correcting, but rather marking the test scripts, we observed that the students seem to be lacking self-checking skills. Okay, one example, if you can recall this example of the direct-indirect speech, there are 3 changes that have to be made, right? And for there are 2 pronoun changes that have to be made. Okay, let's say the student was able to change one particular pronoun, but along the way, he forgot, okay, to change the other pronoun, okay? So this actually is not a case that where the student is not able to apply and doesn't understand the concept, but it's a mere case of oversight and a lack of checking skills. So this is another area that teachers can explore. Other than just teaching concepts, you could probably teach students self-checking skills. Okay, of course, our research has limitations. If you have observed, there's a comparatively smaller number of participants in term 2 and term 3, 8 each, as compared to term 1, 80 participants. And there is also a lack of frequency in the way we administered the entry and exit test. At present, I mean, the study actually mentioned that we conducted the test after 10, 20, 30 weeks, when most literature actually recommended once every 3 weeks. And also, there's a lack of multiple measures because we were just looking at entry and exit tests. We should actually look at probably classroom observations. We should consider teacher and student feedback and include them as part of our research. Some students could also possibly have other unidentified learning needs. Okay, like for example, they could be having problems regulating attention. They could be having emotional issues like a lack of motivation. They could be having other language processing issues that we may not be aware of, which can hinder progress. Okay, and in reality, the way we measure students' progress is quite different from the way mainstream schools measure progress. Okay, just if you can recall, this is the same question. Okay, we actually awarded 3 marks for this. So let's say, supposing the student did not manage to get the pronoun change right. If the student was able to change the verb tense and time reference correctly, he could still salvage 2 marks for our entry-exit test. But in the mainstream school, in the mainstream school English exams, 2 marks is awarded for each question. And if, let's say, the student gets the same error, makes the same error, 0 marks is awarded. Yeah. So, like sometimes, what this means is that if, let's say, the student is observed to be making progress in our program, the same is not reflected in the school exams, right? Okay. So, based on what we have mentioned, it is definitely obvious that we need to have include formative assessments as part of our research over and above the summative assessments like exit and entry test. Okay, and further studies at larger scales and involving more grade levels, even a more even sample distribution would help generalize the present study findings. Okay, so in conclusion, what this study has demonstrated is that the longer the period of support given to learners with dyslexia, the more they will benefit in terms of the acquisition and retention of concepts. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of our presentations. Thank you for your patience. But before we end, we would like to share with you feedback from our students' point of view, how the impact of long-term support has benefited them. Okay, so we have here Gregor Koh. Gregor Koh is in Sec 1 this year, and he has been receiving support in the program since he was in P4. And he continued to receive support up till the time when he sat for his PSLE last year. So this is what he has to say. It has helped him prepare for his exams, and he learned to highlight key points. He doesn't like comprehension, and because there's a lot of reading, and he does not know many words. However, teacher has taught me to apply the strategies and look for clues to link the paragraphs together.
And Jeremy, at that point in primary 5, he mentioned that he enjoys how the intervention program teaches topics in a way that helps him to better understand, as well as going more in-depth so that he can fully understand the given questions. And I think this is only possible when students are being supported over a long period of time, and where the support given is consistent, and for them, right? So I think we have come to an end, and thank you very much for your kind attention. So if you do have any other questions with regards to this research or with regards to the booth, next slide, you can email any one of us, or I do believe we have a booth just across and in the opposite room, so please feel free to visit that as well.